I think sometimes the word discipline has like a million different definitions to a lot of people. And that's the case in life. Like, it's how we're wired. We are who we are based on our experiences in life. Things we've gone through, how we were raised, like how our parents parented us. Like, that's how we are. That's why we are the way we are. So everyone has, like, I think, different definitions for different things based on their own reality. And so when I hear discipline, I hear sticking to your beliefs.
Well, hello.
Welcome. It's Thursday. Yeah, man, it's Thursday. It's October 24th, 2019. Counting down the days left of basically the decade, I guess. And welcome.
Jeez.
I know, dude. Crushing Iron Podcast 316. No?
315.
All right, 315, whatever.
It's 315 podcasts. And I thought for sure you were going to come on today and say, welcome to the Two Guys That Love Baseball podcast.
I know, dude. That would have been like a dream. A
little
dream
spin-off. Maybe we could have a spin-off
little
cast.
dream scenario for you. But yeah, this is a triathlon-related podcast. We cover all things triathlon, life, how they intersect. Mike and I both as athletes and coaches. We share our experiences both as athletes and then also the interactions and experiences we have with our athletes. And that's where we get most of our content and our discussion. And it's kind of just an open dialogue between the two of us. We've been best friends for about 7 years now. And so that's what we do. And we hope that, first, thanks for listening and taking time out of your day to let us talk to you. And hopefully you can take something away from this podcast. But yes, as Mike is a huge baseball fan, and I said this to our friend Jen yesterday, who was walking us through the Astros field at Minute Maid Park, and I was like, oh man, my buddy Mike would be in like heaven right now. We're here in Houston. Our family came down to the Houston, Texas area much earlier than anticipated. We were coming down to Waco for Waco 70.3, which is this weekend, and we have an athlete that I work with, Summer, and her family with Chris and their kids are good friends with our family, and so we came down early to hang out with them. And one of Allie's really, really good friends from growing up in high school works player HR for the Astros. And
I didn't know.
Yeah, so when we used to live in Kansas City, and anytime the Astros would come into town, she would call in and get us free tickets, and we'd head over to the stadium and watch. But she knew we were coming in town, and she hooked us up yesterday.
Yeah,
we got obviously the World Series is here in town. We got there around 2. She gave us a whole tour of basically everything. From we got to go on the field, we got to go in some special like other level place. We got to go to the offices. She was talking to the owner when we walked in and met her. Which was I know it's been an interesting day for that team in general the last couple of days. But
did you get a little triathlon talk going with him?
No, I wasn't able to squeak in anything much triathlon. Although she did remind me of last year or 2 years ago, I think, when the Astros won it. She was listening to our podcast on the plane home from winning the World Series. But anyway,
that's how famous we are, right there.
Yeah, it was a great experience. Hayden had a good time. I don't know that he fully grasped the coolness and uniqueness of what he was doing being on the field, and we were walking onto the field through like this tunnel as like the whole Nationals team was walking in off the bus. Oh my god, those guys are giant.
Are they?
Yes, dude, I was kind of surprised. Like, I mean, you always see, like, you watch professional sports on TV and you're like, they look like normal people. Like, NBA basketball players, you think they look like, they're like 6 foot. And then you see them in real life, and they're all like, 9'3". And we were walking through the tunnel, and they're big dudes, like, not like giant, like 6'5". They're very stout, most of them.
Mm-hmm.
It was great fun. It was walking there, and then we walked up to the marketing and sales offices where one of her offices was located, and like the guys there were like, Hayden didn't have on like any Astros gear. And they're like, dude, we gotta suit you up. Come with me. And they like ran him down the hallway and gave him like 2 backpacks, and were like opening drawers and shoving like bobblehead dolls and all kinds of stuff into his bag. And like he was wearing a little stick-on eye black, and got some fake baseballs. But it was actually a really cool moment. I was holding them. We were walking on the field, and they were doing some BP, and one of the guys, the work security, picked up one of the foul balls and walked over and gave it to him, which is pretty cool. He's got a little World Series ball with like the logo on it and stuff.
Nice.
It was pretty neat. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. You know that I'm not a huge baseball fan, but it was a very, very cool experience, and one of those impressionable moments. I think you can look back and kind of think, if Hayden picks up, like when we got home last night, he was playing quote unquote baseball in the backyard. So you just never know like what kind of, I think people in general are so much more impressionable than they want to probably allow you to think they are. And obviously kids are much more impressionable, I think, than adults in a lot of ways, because they're just open. And so, yeah, it'll definitely be one of those like things you look back on if he like picks up baseball or has these, thoughts or feelings or whatever, and you'll kind of go back to that moment and be like, hey, remember this time you did this? And no, it was interesting. It made me kind of feel a lot like, I think, what people who get super excited about like their family members that come to like these huge 70.3 and Ironman events, they have like no idea what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
They really have no clue, but they're rocking like spectator shirts and signs and like, big heads on a stick, and like they're walking around. They're just so excited about, absolutely, they have no idea what's going on. They just know it's super important, and everyone's excited. And it's a big moment. And so it actually did kind of remind me that, again, like I'm not a huge baseball guy. I mean, I know enough about it to be a fan, but in terms of like, being a diehard baseball fan, I'm not that guy. But it just being in that atmosphere, in that arena, was very much like you can't just help but like feel that it's an energy. But it reminded me of what it's also like as a coach, like to walk up to Ironman Day and you're not participating, but just to feel like that palpable energy that something big is happening here. Obviously they are on a professional stage, but yeah, it was interesting. It was a cool experience. Definitely something I'm very grateful to have done and had that, and got to hang out with Hayden and Allie as we did that together.
Yeah. No, and it's a lot. It's really cool, man. I got to go to one World Series game. It was like in the way back in the dark ages, but there's something about it. I am a huge baseball fan, and to me, there's something about the World Series that just stands apart. I think it's just the fact that they're 7-game series and they're just such a grind. I mean, you watch baseball's 162 games. I mean, that is just incredible.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about what that takes as far as bouncing back and resiliency, and you talk about recovering and the stuff they have to go through, you talk about Nagels all the time, and man, those guys, there's just always something going on, and they just got to keep pressing through, and the thought I had last night was, the Astros, I think, are one of the best teams assembled that I've seen in my lifetime, and they just got trounced last night. Mm-hmm. But it basically came down to arguably their best player, Bergman, mishandling sort of a ground ball, and it just opened the floodgates. So it was one mistake during a 162 game season, comes down to a 7-game series in the World Series, and one mistake, pretty much. And not that I'm blaming the game on him, but it was just interesting to think about how one little lapse can really destroy a game and or a race. That's kind of all I always do, is like, how's that analogy take place there?
Mm-hmm. And how it was like one small thing, like
little
an error.
Thing. Maybe just like a little bit of a peek up while he was trying to field it, kind of thing. Just
and I think and this is how like sports are in general, especially like at the really high level that go for such long periods of time and have these super long, like hockey. Hockey is like an insanely long season. Like every time I feel like this season's over, like 2 weeks later, I feel like they're starting back up for like preseason NHL stuff, because those guys are just like freakishly tough and athletic. And you think about like, again, it's like it's not really these athletes, I think, that physically start to fatigue. I'm sure they do, they do physically fatigue, but it's also like the emotional and mental toll that they have to be able to sustain at such a high level for such a high period of time, to that just like that, just like the smallest little thing, and you make something that you can make probably with your eye, a play you can make with your eyes closed, 999 times out of 1,000, and it mean nothing, and then the time you don't do it is when it could mean everything, and you go down 2-0. And so, like, for triathletes, that again, like, and we talked about this so many times before, and again, it's why I love sports in general, because there's so many analogies you can go and kind of cross-pollinate between every other sport and then back towards life, is that you can hang tough, and you can be in the moment, and you can be present, and then as soon as you get lazy with kind of being an autopilot is when you make a mistake you can't go back on. Like if you miss an aid station, you miss special needs, you miss grabbing water when you shouldn't, you drop a bottle and don't go back and get it. Like, things that in the moment don't seem so insignificant turn out to be very significant. And it's not just the moment that happened, it was probably the 30 to 45 seconds to a minute beforehand, to where you just had a mental lapse of not being able to focus. And again, like, that's why this time of year too is so important, not to take just physical breaks, but in terms of like letting your body be rest and be more flexible and maybe even do different sports, but you also just need like the mental and emotional flexibility to not be so structured, and because adhering to that structure takes a huge toll. And it takes a lot of focus and a lot of concentration. And I think, again, like, athletes need that break almost more than they need the physical break, because it's just adhering to a plan, if you want that plan to work. And again, like, it's not a time of year to be lazy and put on 35 pounds and just lose every bit of fitness you've gained, but it's time to just scale things back and focus, so that, and again, and really, like, drive home with yourself, if you're a self-coached athlete or you're coached, is just drive it home. They're like, listen, like, this is a time to like totally like be flexible and show yourself the most amount of grace you can possibly show yourself during training, because you deserve it, and you just can't. It's why everything, in the business world, that you'll oftentimes get breaks, or people take sabbaticals. In school, people take semesters. They have like a break in semesters. And obviously you have the off season for major sports. Like, it's not just physical. You just can't maintain that type of mental and emotional focus that you have to, that you need to, so you can actually show the level of performance that you've earned and that you usually have.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I've even been thinking about that right now as far as my training. Obviously, I'm just having a difficult. I'm like kind of falling into your pattern with just running. It's just simpler to me, and it seems less intrusive on my overall lifestyle. But when we came up for the podcast today, I was thinking, I knew you're going to probably ask me, hey, you got any topics? And a lot of times I do, and a lot of times I don't. But today I was going to be like, I don't know. I think I need a break. And we love doing these podcasts, but I love also the idea of, that's why we were kind of talking maybe a little about baseball, or trying to make some analogies and stuff like that, because it's like everything else. You kind of need a little break from talking about specific tactics of triathlon and things of that nature. So that's why I really like, this time of year for me is about watching the World Series and kind of just remembering where I came from, and why it's important, and why I love watching the game. And game one, Scherzer, the pitcher for the Nats, he was, him and Cole, they were kind of making this as sort of the matchup of the century, as far as two dominant pitchers. It's going to be impossible to score, who's going to get the first run, and blah blah blah. And he came out in the first inning and was just getting beat up, and he gave up a couple of runs, and they're facing Cole, and the guy hasn't lost since May, and everybody's thinking it's over. But man, did that guy battle. He battled through that first inning and got through it. And I keep thinking, again, analogies, like sometimes you might be struggling to swim or whatever it is, but just hold it together find your way through it. And then he held them in check through 7. They ended up winning. You know, it was like a no-win scenario when you're looking at that thing in the beginning. There's just like, you know, his race was over, but he just stuck in there, kept working it.
Well, I mean, that's you know, a good analogy for that is that, you know, in terms of like looking at triathlon and how you race, and I always mention this and kind of talk about it in the Ironman World Championships, is you're never going to win the race on the swim. You know, it's the first thing you do. It's the shortest in terms time wise and distance wise. So you're never going to win the race on the swim, but you could definitely lose it.
Yep, he could have given up 3 more runs instead of bearing down and getting out of it. And obviously that's another reason why people just kind of poo-poo the swim and don't want to train and work on it as much as they should. But, you know, I think, you know, and you were going back to running and again, like that's, so if you're looking at your year and you've just had like a huge 2019, you raced a ton, you raced a lot of times that were probably too close together. You did one full, multiple fulls, you know, or you did a ton of 70.3s, whatever you did, it's all relative. You know, it's like if you race like 4 or 5 Olympics or 2 or 3 Olympics and you never have before, to you, that's going to seem like you did a ton. You know, and so again, like when we give these analogies and like these kind of lay things out and we talk, you know, Olympic, sprint, 70.3 or full, and we're kind of giving these examples. Remember, that's all relative to you and where you are in your kind of athletic lifestyle, where you are in your athlete specific cycle in terms of your development, because again, a couple of 5Ks, 10Ks, and a couple of sprints to a lot of athletes is a super busy year. Yep. And
it's going to take a toll on their body depending on how early they are, if they're very new to the sport, if they're new to endurance sports, if they're just kind of getting into it, if they're coming back from a break. So again, like when we give these examples, make sure that, and I want to just make it very clear that, you know, we'll use those examples a lot because that's the training that we've always done, but it could be anything. And so if you're an athlete and you're thinking, God, I did so much this year, I need a break. Breaks are great, but it's also about how you structure your break. Because I talk to a lot of athletes and that we get a lot of emails this time of year. It's like, what do I do with my off season? What do I do with my off season? What do I do with my off season? Should I do this? And there I think are some standard practices you should have when looking at how to structure your off season. But the biggest thing is you know, the biggest few things, like the highlight is, you know, become refreshed. And when I say become refreshed, that doesn't mean take 2 months off and, you know, go travel to your 30 favorite restaurants across America and put on 98 pounds, you know, and not do any exercise. Refreshing means a lot of things. It could mean scaling back on hours to where you're like 5 or 6 hours a week. One of your days of the week is a day off. The other day is a choice day, and just be super flexible. And then also putting your family and the things you've neglected, those now go to the top of the list, because so many of us, when we're in kind of the moment of training for these big races, we neglect so many things. We neglect going to events we normally would go to. We neglect probably household outdoor landscaping chores. I know most of the dudes do. And, you know, you probably neglect personal and family time with your friends and your family and your kids. And so that's the time of year to rejuvenate yourself, to remember why you do these things, to keep the balance, to show them that they're also a priority, or whoever it is a priority, or what you're doing, it also matters. And also, I think, is a great time to give back to yourself, because when you give time and you do things for other people and other things, you automatically feel fulfilled and refreshed. Instead of being which most triathletes can do, is being selfish with their time. And so you can do it that way. And then you have a lot of athletes where I'm just going to go through a run focus. I'm not going to bike and I'm not going to swim. Well, that's all fine and dandy. And I get the reasoning for some people to try that, because it's the easiest thing to do this time of year. You can do it outside. You can do it pretty much no matter what. Swimming, it's dark, it's cold, whatever, yeah. You don't want to go to the pool. Biking, you're probably going to be stuck indoors, and some people absolutely despise the trainer. But what you don't want to do is again, become this really good runner, only to not have it show, because now your bike and your swim sucks. And again, like it's fine to want to do a focused block in terms of I just want to focus on running. That's fine. Add in some strength and injury prevention sessions. Get your running to where you're running like 4 to 6 days a week. You're upping the volume, the weekly mileage, and then continue to add in at least one swim a week and at least 2 bikes a week. Because again, like they'll do this like run focus and like become obsessed with running. And then they get back to triathlon, and they're like, I just still can't get any faster. What's happening? I just can't put my run together. Well, it's not because you can't put your run together because you're now a faster runner. It's just because now your body has become so tired that when you get to the run, you can't express your strength. Like I was emailing back and forth with an athlete yesterday who was a very accomplished runner, but looking back at the times they've put forth at triathlon, they're not even close. And again, like I think that while triathlon is 3 different sports or disciplines, it is one event. And if you don't know how to train your swimming appropriately, if you don't know how to train your bike appropriately, then you're never going to be able to run the way that you want to run. No matter how fit you are, you could take the best athletes in the world at running, and you could go make them swim and bike, and their runs would suffer greatly by trying to push the pace on the swim and the bike, and what would happen to them. So again, like it's great to have a strength. It's great to want to focus on one particular event. But if you want to really minimize your weaknesses and really focus and allow your strengths to shine through and be a huge benefit on race day, you have to get, especially when it's the run, you have to get your body to a point to where it can withstand the swim, it can withstand the bike, and can do it you can still be in a good position to where you can get off the bike and have your best run. But a lot of athletes won't do that. They'll just shelve everything else. They'll put it all on the wayside, and they'll only do running. They'll only do strength, and they'll wonder why they can't put it all together again towards April, May, June, July when they're trying to play catch up. And so again, it's a fine balance and needs to be structured and done appropriately. Again, you don't need to kill yourself with a ton of hours. It needs to be purposeful and short. And again, like that's why the off season is so important. I honestly think it's one of the hardest times of the year to train because you're thinking of the future and you're wanting a break because of the past. So you're sitting here in October, almost November. You're basically sitting in the middle of what's about to be your quote unquote off season, or your Q4 and Q1, and you're preparing your body to rest some because of the past quarter, the past season. But your mind is also thinking, but I still want to be ready for this next year. But the time constraints are much thinner. It's going to be dark all the time here in about 2 weeks. It's going to be cold. A lot of people's moods are just totally dampened by the amount of darkness and cold weather. Like I see it in my athletes every year. They just kind of get in a funk. There's a reason there's seasonal depression. You just kind of get in a funk, and that affects your training. It affects where you are mentally and emotionally. So that's why, again, I think it's the most neglected part of the year because it's easy to kind of just write off as in it's the off season, doesn't matter, which kind of fuels what you're already thinking in terms of not being motivated and not being committed and thinking you need a time off and being down and the weather's getting to you and the temperature's getting to you and the darkness is getting to you. But it's also so important in that it's going to set you up for the year that you want to have. Because you don't ever want to look back on this time and think, I just wasted it all and I let everything else get to me and I got to fix it next year. And so if you're out there and you're thinking, I need time off is good, but it's how you take that time and when you take it and how it's structured or unstructured that can still allow you to kind of, again, I think we talked about this on Monday, is treading water or maybe even doing a little bit of swimming versus drowning. And that's why this time of year is so tough, and it's so tough as well, I think to structure.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I totally agree. If you can keep with it, I'm just convinced that if you can just keep with it and keep any of the 3 disciplines from completely falling off the rails, you're way ahead of yourself going into the year. Because I was having a conversation yesterday with one of our athletes that's actually racing this weekend at Waco, and we were talking about this concept of how the longer you're in the sport and the more races you've done, and like you said earlier, it's all relative. It could be, your first 5K, you're going to be on edge, and it's the toughest thing you've ever done, and obviously your first Ironman, same deal. But as you get into them, as you do a few of these things, you sort of take that a little bit of the emotional stress out of it, and if you can rewire your thinking in a way that is like, well, I know I can do this. I mean, I've done it, and I understand what it takes, and I've been through it, and blah blah blah. If you have that baseline fitness, and going into the year, and then of course going towards the race where you can ramp that up a little bit, if you're in a position where you can kind of do that and you just stay with it all year, you're way ahead of the game. And I think that sometimes, and I know we talked about this several podcasts ago, but that short kind of ramp up and how that might be even valuable going into next year. But it's just about sticking with it and doing something. I was going to ask you a question because I had a athlete the other day that I think it was like an hour 30 bike ride, trainer ride, and he was short on time, and it had 5-minute hard sets or whatever intervals, and he'd put in the 5 sets of intervals and then cut his cool down or his warm down short. And I think logically or like intuitively that seems like the right thing to do, but I just wonder sometimes, like if you're in a you're struggling to get on the bike, so he had to cut it short. He was running out of time. And my thought was, well, I wonder if it's not a bad idea to cut out one more of those sets and just cool down a little bit longer in the off season. Do you ever think of it like that way?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a loaded question in terms of knowing and being able to see what other sessions they have for the week. If they don't have any other hard sessions for the week and they just have maybe a couple of zone 1, zone 2 rides for the week, and this is the only day they have the intensity, then a lot of times I would just generally say just power through the intervals, and skip some of the cool down. But it also depends on what they're doing the rest of the day and what the next day looks like. Because what you also don't want to do is you don't want to, have end your interval at like minute 58 and then get off the bike after 60. And then you're going to be a lot more stiff, and you're going to have a lot more lactic acid buildup, depending what the interval is, to just sit there, and you're going to be more sore the next day. How had you taken the time to spun it out? So it's definitely a fine line between, especially if they're going to go sitting at a desk the rest of the day, or they're going to hop in their car and be driving around, and they're going to get super stiff. Whereas if it was somebody who was going to be walking around a good portion of the day, and they're probably going to loosen things up, then you could probably cut the cool down short a little bit. But again, you'd have to see like the total picture of what they have going on for the week and make those choices. But generally, I say do the intervals, and I always say if you're gonna do anything, cut down the warm down, or even the warm up. If it's 20 minutes and you only got an hour, do it for 10, and then just build into your intervals, and maybe not go as aggressively as you normally would, but definitely keep the cool down. There's also a lot of science out there that says you should do your intervals much earlier before taking too long to warm up. And so there's definitely a lot of ways to look at that, and again, it's super dependent on the athlete and what they're going to do the rest of the day and what the rest of their week looks like. But again, like that's a great decision by that athlete to know what they feel like they need to get in that day and what's okay, versus like again, when you guys you look at your training and especially if you're self-coach, you're looking at your training schedule, it's like, stop doing things in reverse. Stop planning your life around your training, because then everything is going to cut short. You're never going to be exactly doing what you need to do in life, and you're not going to be doing exactly what you need to do in training, because you're pressing against each other. Like they're like butting heads like rams. You need to plan your training into your life, because if you can do that, because life is you don't want to ever you have the biggest variable be affecting everything all at once. So if you can plan your training into your life and do it in a methodical way that's purposeful, while looking at it and saying, like when I make a week for an athlete, I say, I want you to look at this week and think, I can do all of this, and I can definitely do a little bit more. I don't ever want you to look at it and say, I can probably get this done, because probably getting it done means I've already set you up for failure. Because now you're stressed about time management and getting things done, because obviously as we all know, you can plan your week as best you can, but a lot of times the week ends up planning you in terms of things come up with, personal and professional responsibilities, your kids get sick, your spouse has to stay home for work, whatever. So you want to be able to allow for those kind of variables to happen. You can't say, all right, I'm going to do all this training this week, regardless of what my life is throwing at me, and then I'm just going to work the rest in. It is so counterproductive, and actually had a very lengthy phone call with an athlete earlier this week, and I just simply said, there becomes a point with pretty much every athlete that you work with that removing, because I was talking about basically overtraining. Like I come into contact with and work with a lot of athletes who come in totally 100% overtrained. And I don't mean overtrained as in doing in too much intensity. I mean, I work with a lot of athletes who come from, specifically, I have an athlete now that's doing Ironman in Arizona who came from a different program, and I think we're just now getting to where this athlete is back to homeostasis, because they had been driven into the ground so much over the course of the earliest part of the year through July, to where we're just now kind of figuring out, oh my God, now there's the fitness. It's you have to remove layers and layers. And I think that's one of the biggest areas of confusion with athletes is the amount of time it takes to remove the layers of fatigue from someone that is overtrained. This athlete was overtrained in July, and now it's end of October, and it was just 2 weeks ago we kind of both said to each other, I think we're back. I think we're back. It takes so, because again, if you're in a place of chronic overtraining, which again so many athletes are, and again it's not just about intensity. It's about the relationship of the volume you're given to the life that you have. And that is what leads to overtraining, because it also leads to just this increased stress and anxiety level, which again, I think this athlete would admit that was also part of it. And this is my phone call earlier this week, was that if you have this insane anxiety and stress level about doing your sessions are never going to be as good as they could, because you're not going to be present. You're not going to be doing what you need to be doing. You're not going to be able to do it to the best of your ability. So you might as well either cut it short or don't do it at all until you feel like you can do it in a better way that's present and you feel good. Whether that's guilt or shame from taking time away from your family. I know a lot of athletes who in the past have not really had good rides, so they're taking away 4 hours from everybody. They go out for a 4-hour ride and they feel so much guilt for leaving their family that they go out and have a piss poor 4-hour ride while they're still away from their family. So not only have they taken 4 hours away from their family, but to be honest, they've taken 4 hours away from themselves because they weren't present enough to actually do something with it. And again, when athletes look at the phrase overtraining, there's this huge, people are confused. It's just thinking it's an intense thing. It also can be just an insane amount of volume that is disproportionate to the athlete and what they can handle. It's the coach's biggest obstacle or biggest answer that they have to give every athlete is finding appropriate load. And if you can find an athlete's appropriate load, because again, when you look at the global stress of an athlete, which is personal, professional, physical, they're all intertwined. They all affect each other. A super high stress day on the bike or the run that you did, a long day, it's going to affect how you manage your day and how much you have to give personally and professionally. And the same goes for the level of stress in your personal and professional relationships. If the stress level is high on those, you can't just simply power through. People, listen, they are all connected. You can't compartmentalize triathlon training and physical stress and just act like it has no symbiotic relationship with the rest of your life. It's negligent to yourself and to your body and to your mind. They're all connected. And everyone could look back on their training and say, I can totally see how I was totally swamped with work. I was totally stressed. I have no energy. And guess what? You probably didn't move from your desk. So on the flip side, to argue that they're not connected, or that they shouldn't affect the demands and your ability to perform, or your ability to do sessions with the volume that you want to have or you don't have, and that they don't correspond to each other, is just foolish. Like, you can, I mean, heck, when we drove down here, I was exhausted when I got done, like shelled. I went out for a run the next day for 30 minutes, and I felt like it was like 25 miles. What did I do the day before? I sat in the car still and didn't move for 12 hours. But you're like navigating the interstate and people, which is like, enough of a stress. But and again, like that is like the key when you work with athletes. And again, that's why self-coaching can be so hard for type A athletes, is they will coach themselves with a sledgehammer. And I think I used this analogy on one of our very earliest podcasts, is that, when athletes look to get a coach, they often see the coach as like the hammer. And that is 100% correct. The coach is the hammer. But what people don't understand is that we don't use the blunt side. We turn it around and use the other side to pry you out of the trouble you've gotten yourself into, or pulling you back, or getting you out of a hole, or preventing you from overtraining. It's not to beat you into hours and hours of ridiculous, sometimes meaningless training just for the sake of doing it. It's getting you out of your own way and pulling you out of trouble.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the more I get into coaching, the more people I talk to, and the more I'm in this whole thing, I find myself doing that exact same thing all the time. I love reading, if it's a 35-minute easy chill run, for example, or 45 minutes or whatever it is. I love reading, felt great, could have kept going. I felt like I could have went all day. And I'll be like, great, remember that feeling, but never do that, because I think it's so easy sometimes to, sleep when you're feeling good too, as far as like, you know what, I'm just going to pump out a couple more miles here or whatever. But if you're in a spot where you have an easy chill recovery and you feel awesome at the end of it, and when you stop when you should, that's the feeling, right? I mean, if you can get that feeling of, I wanted to keep going, I mean, that's to me, the emotional and mental flip through that you want to always kind of keep, ideally at the top of everything.
It's funny, like you say, it's like there's, and you've always said this back to you, like when you and I, first started to work together, was that you were like, I really want to leave my runs feeling more energized than when I started. Mm-hmm. Not vice versa. And there was this, there was an article I came across the other day that had, I think the title was like, why you should feel good about life and why you should feel good after running. And I think it was from like David Roach. He's a big trail running coach and a very accomplished trail runner himself, and writes for Trail Runner magazine. But I was like, that's like one of the most like misunderstood parts of like the whole beat yesterday, smash yourself, society that we live in now, is that like somehow people have gotten to a place to where exercise is supposed to be like, is envisioned to be this like masochistic, crush yourself, beat myself up time, when the reality is guess what the rest of life does to you? Life just straight up beats you down. Like work, relationship, if you have kids, like I've never felt more like beaten down than having to wrangle like a moody toddler for 4 hours. Like it crushes your soul. So why would you want to go out and crush your soul again by some expectation-ridden, data analyzed, performance review where you may or may not meet your expectation and you just drive yourself into the ground? No, you should go out and do something for yourself that makes you feel good, that allows you to escape being pulled in a million different directions, whether it's you're sitting at your job and you mean so many things, so many people, and then you get home and you mean so many things to your wife or your husband or your kids, and then you want to go out and you want to go beat yourself into the ground so you come back more tired than you did before. That's not really going to leave you equipped to deal with the rest of life. And that's probably like the example I can give for managing stress and how it needs to be done, and why you can't just load athletes to death just because. Because you might think, oh, well, we got to get ready for this event in 3 weeks, so you got to do your interval work today. Well, my life is super stressed, and you're going to dig a hole. A, it's either going to take you forever to get out of, or B, you might not get out of it. Or the only way you might get out of it is to have total rest because you got injured. Like, these are, again, like, these all things are super, super connected, and that is also why, like, so many athletes are hardwired to just push through like it's a badge of honor. It's not. Listening to your body is like the most important thing you can do. Before you start every run, don't have your mind ask what it wants to run. Let your body tell you what it wants to run, and then go with that. And I always guarantee you'll feel better. But it's so hard to, and again, I honestly think it's part of like this societal issue of people's inability to listen. We're so distracted. There's so many things out there that it's incredibly hard to just sit down and listen to somebody. Like, you could, I'm sure, like, people listen to this podcast and they're like deep in thought, and all of a sudden they just like look down and pick up their phone just to pick it up and like start scrolling through Facebook or Twitter. And they're like, wait, where are you? Are you 2 places, 3 places at once? Because you can't be everywhere. But we just do that, and so it makes things really, really hard to not just listen to ourselves and our body and what it really needs, but to communicate that between our mind and our body and back and forth, and understand what that means. Because everything now is so driven by, data and expectations and beating this and doing that we have this disassociation with who we are each day, and that, like, I get on to my athletes sometimes. They're like, well, this wasn't my best session, but I'm like, guess what? Newsflash. You have one best session and one worst session of everything in your life. Everything else is in the middle. Everything. Yeah. You could do 10,000 workouts, and guess what? One's going to be the best and one's going to be the worst. And you know what? The rest of them, they're just in the middle. So stop trying to analyze and expect everything to be the best, because who you are each day is vastly different than who you were the day before. Your sleep is going to be different. Your life is going to be different. Stresses are going to be different. Your body's going to have adapted different. The temperature outside is going to be different. The workout's going to be different. It's all different. And so, again, like, it's one of like the hardest things for athletes that are driven, and then again, not just are driven, but are chasing these things, that want these things so bad they can't compute how reining it back in or taking a day off is actually going to be what propels them forward, because it's totally contradictory to what you see other people talk about or post or write about. It's always about pushing forward. It's about moving no matter what. It's like, what happened to like showing your body a little bit of self-care? Our last podcast was really something about like, mental and emotional self-care. But like, I had an athlete earlier today who didn't say anything after a workout, and I was like, hey, how's it going? And she was like, oh, and like rattled down this list. And she was like, I always wonder, like, do you see something with my training, or are you just asking? And I was like, well, I can see that things are a little bit different in what you were doing, like what I usually would expect you to do. I don't have expectations, but I always have a general range of what, a wide range of what athletes, I would assume they're going to be able to do given the training load. Then I also said the biggest thing, and this is again like what I think athletes totally misunderstand about coaching, is that the greatest way to figure out how an athlete is doing is like, comment or ask like, hey, how's that feel? Or how did this feel? Or how do you feel? And I was like, usually I can tell, like, if an athlete who comments a lot just goes silent for like 2 days, even if the workouts are done, goes silent, I'm like, hey, what's up? And it could be like they're super busy, or it could be like they're overwhelmed. If you don't ask, you don't know. And I was like, I can usually tell by how things look, like the numbers a little bit. But then how I really know how things are going is because you're either lack of commenting or the words in your comments. You can tell somebody's grumpy or tired, and she was just saying she was overwhelmed with life and work and couldn't wait to go on vacation. And I was like, just like, remember, just that these things that's, in your life, you can plan things out as best you can, but the only real like your plan A is like never going to happen. Like, and that's why you don't have. That's why plans are great, but how you prepare and have a mindset of how I'm going to react to these plans not working is usually actually your best plan. Is to be in like as being like, you know, want to be on the offense with our planning and our goals and our race calendar, but so many people spend so little time on preparing themselves to be in defense of how to monitor and manage and change, you know, the way things are to be able to handle what life dictates to you. So again, like it's hard. It's definitely not easy, and I'm definitely not like trying to articulate that this is something that's supposed to be easy. It's very, very, very hard. But I promise that there are so many athletes that are listening to this podcast who their biggest hurdle of performing well year in and year out, or even just in a season, it has probably oftentimes like little to do with their ability to perform physically, but it's where they are mentally and emotionally. And it's how they can get to a place where they can firmly and purposely reflect and express what they've been able to work hard to accomplish. And if you can't remove, you know, the guilt and anxiety, and you can't work with athletes that way, or work with yourself to remove that, and again, like that is like honestly 90% coaching for a lot of people is like very little to do physical and training wise. It's getting them to change their mind and change their mindset about how they see things and how they show themselves grace, and what it's like to manage your stress level and be kind to yourself, because that's actually what's going to lead yourself to your best performance, not just driving yourself into the ground for the sake of driving yourself into the ground.
Yeah. Well, one of the things about this sport is, and that I've been really working at, and what you just said there is, like, I feel like I have the ability, you know, I mean, a lot of us have the ability to have really good races, but like, how do you put together the long-term consistency and things like that? Like, consistency is something I really struggle with, you know. I don't know if it's like, you know, we talk about addiction a lot on this podcast, and coming from addicted families or adult children of alcoholics or whatever. And there's a thing in there called, you know, we need excitement. And that's one of those things I always think about with regard to the discipline it takes, you know, maybe to you know, keep nailing sessions as they're written and things like that. Or so how do I find more excitement in training? And do I need it, or what's the deal there? Like, if I could stay consistent, for example, and, you know, Jocko Willink, this guy who's a Marine or a Navy SEAL, and he talks about this thing called discipline equals freedom. And I buy into all that stuff. It's just very difficult for me to do sometimes. So, you know, like in the fall here, the late season, off season type stuff, I try to think of ways to make it feel like I grew up playing games, right? I didn't grow up training per se, like the way a triathlete would train, but I was pretty good at like dynamics of training. So, for example, when I think of like, how do I find more enjoyment out of swimming? I think of it in terms of like water polo or something. Like, that's how I would approach a swim, you know, where sometimes you're just chilling and sometimes you're floating around and other times you got to go after it, right? So if you swim like a water polo player, maybe bike like a mountain biker, where you kind of got to go after it to get up the hills. Sometimes you're just chilling, and, you know, like the dynamics of changing speeds and thinking like that. Or maybe like my big thing with running is think like a soccer player, you know, because they're just cruising a lot of times and just kind of moving around and whatever, and every once in a while they got a burst. So like, that's why I love running trails, because it sort of builds that in, you know. And I don't know if you feel that too, but sometimes you just kind of start letting loose and you don't know why. And then you hit a hill and you got to grind it a little bit and all these other things. So how do you find that, I mean, excitement or variation without varying, you know, without giving up the important stuff?
You know, I think sometimes like the word discipline has like a million different definitions to a lot of people. You know, and that's the case in life. Like, it's how we're wired. You know, like we are who we are based on our experiences in life. things we've gone through, how we were raised, like how our parents, parented us, like that's how we are. That's why we are the way we are. So everyone has, like, I think, different definitions for different things based on their own reality. And so when I hear discipline, I hear sticking to your beliefs. I don't hear doing things no matter what because it's expected of you. And I think that's a, like, stark contrast of, like, people patting themselves on the back for being disciplined. There are wonderful things about the military, but I have talked to so many other people that are like, yeah, the stuff we did was, like, absolutely, like, purposeless. It was just do it to show we had discipline. And I get that discipline is a great thing, and I think it's a great thing to have, but it's also, I think, a confusing word to so many people because they think discipline as 100% adherence all the time to doing something no matter what if you don't want to, versus what discipline could be is I'm showing self-discipline because in my kind of hierarchy of needs or the way that I list things that are important to me, taking care of myself is number one. So I have the discipline. Do you know what? It's because, I mean, you could interchange a million different words. Like, you could put boundaries in there.
Yeah.
Like, have discipline. That's like probably most people's downfall in a lot of areas in life is, like, they don't have any discipline to keep their boundaries. Like, they can't say no. Like, what is so hard? I mean, I'd probably say it too much, but I'm like, what's hard about saying no? No, I don't want to. No, I don't want to. No, I don't want to. I mean, it's like you can say no, and you can stick to what you think is best for you. You don't have to worry about appeasing everyone and everything just for the sake of doing it. Being a yes person. I think there's a lot of power in that. And so, like, when you hear discipline, you could think, all right, I'm going to have discipline to listen to my body and be objective in a way that I haven't been before. Because being disciplined and, like, just doing it, that's not necessarily a good thing either. Because sometimes it could be your motivation and your purpose could be totally hollow just for the sake of doing it and being repetitive. But there's a lot of good to be taken from it, like what I'm trying to say, but there's also a lot of ways to frame it, in that it can be framed as positive and framed as negative. I mean, hell, most people would describe serial killers as incredibly disciplined.
Yeah.
So let's not go, like, over the edge and saying it's like this really great, always good thing. It's how you frame it and what relationship you choose to have with it and apply it. And so, it's like,
it's funny, man. I get a ad all the time on Facebook for I think it's the Army Rangers t-shirt store, and their shirt says, "Yeah, but did you die?" And it's like,
no.
so there's, like, that side, and it's so. Yeah. I'm with you, man. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you really should push yourself into uncomfortable situations, but it has to be at the right time. It can't be just every morning just thrash. I didn't die, but man, I've been, like, laid down for a month. I mean, what good is that too? But and again, like, that's, like, just going back to the word discipline is, I mean, again, there's so many ways to apply it, but I think, kind of in summary, like, when you look at this time of year, this is the perfect time. We talk about overtraining and getting the right mindset. Like, this is the time of year to where you need to start rebuilding yourself as a person, because not necessarily as a person. So I'm sure a lot of you are always great all the time. But but to be fair, that's what January 1st is. Everybody makes, like, these rebuild my life, rebuild who I am every year by this New Year's resolution and goals, and then by February 3rd they're like, take me to the Golden Corral and let me go steal some things. That's how people work. And so the best time of year for triathletes right now is to rebuild yourself as an athlete, mentally, emotionally, physically. Rebuild yourself, make yourself stronger, prioritize the things to be prioritized. And the mental and emotional aspect of it is the most underrated part of triathlon. And this is the time of year to start training in a way and working with yourself in a way that shows yourself grace, that leaves you objective, that allows yourself to read who you are, to be who you are, to try things out, and to listen to what's stressful and what's not stressful, and then be able to adapt and then be okay with it. Be okay with it. Like,
I was talking, another phone call I had earlier this week was an athlete was like, hey, well, at like 9 o'clock, it's like, what if it's like 9 o'clock at night and I've had like a super long day at work, and I don't, I'm just exhausted and I've got like a run on the schedule. What if I text you to ask you about what I should do? I'm like, well, first off, I'm going to say, don't ever text me again and ask me about that question. Don't run. Don't run. And then I'm like, you're a grown adult. Don't run. Like, it makes total sense to not do that, right? Because you're exhausted, and all you just make yourself more exhausted and put off sleep. Like, but so many oftentimes we sacrifice the next week for allowing our type A, unobjective, obsessed, addicted nature of just doing it today to totally sacrifice and diminish future possibilities and performance just because of the sake of doing it right now. And there's just, there's just so much freedom to be had in this sport that you shouldn't feel constrained and chained down to do these things. Again, you can have a green streak in Training Peaks for 60 days, and you can think that's the best case in the world. But if on 4 of those workouts you dug yourself into the ground and became more tired and went too far beyond, then it was bad. But some people would argue that's just discipline. It's like, so just listen to yourself and start to work on training yourself and your mindset on how to deal with things and understanding stress and how they affect each other and paying attention to yourself and not just driving yourself into the ground over and over and over and over and over again. There's a time and a place to be extra disciplined in certain areas. But for a lot of people right now, it's time to reshape the athlete and the triathlete that you are mentally, emotionally, and physically, and stop ignoring the fact that all 3 of those are important, and stop ignoring the fact that there is so much stress to be taken into account, and that they all intersect and they're all intertwined, they all affect each other.
Good way to end her right there, buddy.
A good way to end her. I'm going to hop off and go play catch up back with my new mitt.
You got some glove oil, man?
You got some glove oil. Going to work on my change up. And I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go back to work. But hey, it's a beautiful day here. Good luck to everyone participating this weekend. I'll be down in Waco for Waco 70.3. I'm stunned. The weather is gorgeous. I'll be rocking a C26 hoodie at the start. It's going to be in the 40s. I did not anticipate sending out my cold weather gear email to the people participating in Texas this weekend, but I did. So do that. Look out for it. Be prepared. Have fun. Look forward to spectating and having a good time, and then probably asking for donations because my wife will probably break our credit card at the Magnolia Place for the fixer-upper. So, pray for me. Anyway, that is, that's all I got. We appreciate you listening and tuning in. Subscribe, review, let us know what you think. If you haven't been, hop on over to crushingiron.com. It is our one-stop shop with info on training, coaching, swim analysis, our camps. They're almost sold out for next year already. And you can always email us, Mike, crushingiron@gmail.com, or me, C26coach@gmail.com.
All right, man. Enjoy your catch.
I will, man. Talk to you later.
All right, see you.